Hey, true crime fanatics, this is Claire.
And I'm Andy.
You're tuned in to the Homicide Hobbies podcast, which is a podcast for people who love to hear about the horrendous crimes that people commit. Enjoy. What do you have for us today?
So get you a pen and paper, because I got you one
Again?
that I know you're going to... I know it.
Pen and paper.
So again, just let me know if you need me to slow down.
Just don't tell it in a confusing manner.
Well, fuck you if you're confused, okay?
It's your storytelling. Get to it. What do you got for us?
So we're going to start in 2005, but our son bitches, and yes, there is a plural to that, don't get arrested until 2017. So
those lucky son bitches. Who are we talking about? And where?
Our where is North Shields in the UK. And our who is a wannabe cult. There is debate on whether or not they are a cult, because it is only a total of 5 people in this group. And one of the 5 members will become the victim.
Oh.
Yes. So I'm going to start by telling you in advance that the person we're going to talk about suffers from extreme physical and mental torture. And I do not recommend consuming any food or beverages once we get started in that, because it's a bit disturbing.
All right.
And also, we're going to cover a lot of weird, heinous crimes, some bestiality.
Heinous crimes.
Claire's missed it. The torture, like I said, and some murder, obviously. Now I'm going to tell you a little bit about each one of the people involved.
Mm-hmm.
So make sure you said you got your pen and paper. Now let's get going. Our first feller that I'm going to tell you about is James Prout. He was 45 years old. He was the 6th of 8 kids. His mom suffered with mental illness his entire childhood, and that left James and his siblings to be raised for the majority of their childhood in foster care. James was also mildly mentally handicapped, so he did receive like some sort of funding.
Yeah. Some sort of disability.
Yeah, I don't know exactly what his IQ was, just that he really struggled in life.
Mm-hmm.
And when James grew up, he ended up in a relationship with a woman named Mandy.
Is she part of our 5?
No. They had 2 children together.
Ooh.
For the remainder of this case, we're going to call James Jimmy, okay? Mandy and Jimmy split up, and Jimmy kind of fell on hard times. He got addicted to some drugs. He ended up homeless. He really struggled, and he ended up having to go to various soup kitchens to be able to eat. And that's when Jimmy met a man named Zahid Zaman.
Is he one of our 5?
He is the ringleader of our 5. So you've got Jimmy and Zahid.
Got it. The leader. Okay. How old is Zahid?
So now I'm going to tell you about Zahid. Zahid appeared to be a pillar of the community. Zahid was 43 years old, and he was getting around in a motorized wheelchair after he was in a car accident. Zahid would volunteer at local soup kitchens to help vulnerable people in the community.
Is that how they met?
That is how they met. And Zahid was an animal lover. He genuinely seemed like a great person.
Like he loved to kill them?
No. Like his persona that he put out for people was that he was just generally a great guy. He liked to help people. He liked animals. Even though he's handicapped himself and struggling with whatever his disability was after his car accident, he was still willing to help other people.
Got it.
He would often help his neighbors, and like I said, he appeared to be a very caring, genuine human being. And Zahid also received financial assistance for his disabilities from his car accident.
Mm-hmm.
I don't understand how it works in the UK, but to me, it looks like it's like a social services type situation.
Right.
Zahid and Jimmy have met, and Zahid really seems to care about helping Jimmy get back up on his feet. So Zahid was like, hey, Jimmy, why don't you come and stay in my house with me and my girlfriend? So now we're going to put a pin in Jimmy and Zahid, and I'm going to tell you about Zahid's girlfriend. She's one of our 5 also. She's number 3. In 2005, Zahid made himself an online dating profile where he posted a picture of himself posing in front of gold bars. Yeah,
Hey.
exactly. And that was his profile picture on this dating website. But it apparently lured in this woman named Kay Rayworth.
So she too has a low IQ.
Yes, all of the people except Zahid have a diminished capacity with their thinking skills. So Kay was born November 10th, 1960. She was 45 years old. She was divorced twice. She had 2 children with her first husband. Her friends and family described her as having a bright, happy personality. However, after her second divorce, she was seriously struggling with loneliness. So that's when she set up a dating profile and saw Zahid.
And she had an ATM as her picture.
She did not, but she began chatting with Zahid, and then the two began online dating, which I am not part of that. And I'm glad I missed out on the whole dating online thing because it's a joke. Because you only get to see the part of somebody that they want you to see. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, how do you really get to know somebody?
So I feel like some of them, not that I know, but so I hear, is that they ask you like questionnaire things as like a matchmaking kind of scenario. Like that's why it's people you match with.
Right, but once they start online dating, how do you really like?
I don't know. You just got to have faith that whoever you're talking to is also looking for love and being genuine. There's no guarantee because there's a lot of sickos out there.
There sure are, and not to say that I've become jaded in life, but people are fucking lion sacks of dog shit.
Tell us what you really think.
I don't remember where I heard it before, but you have to see somebody at their worst. And when they're at their absolute worst, are you okay with them like that?
Seems like wildly awful advice.
No, you have to be able to see someone at their worst and decide, are you okay with them being like that? And if you are, then feel free to proceed. But because realistically, I don't think you can change people. I think people naturally are who they are. And you can't be in a serious relationship with somebody or have kids with somebody if you can't handle all of their various moods and vice versa. Like,
So I sort of kind of agree with it. However, like, I don't know.
yeah, well,
That you can't change people, but like, I wouldn't say hinging your future on like a particular thing. People can have bad days and do stupid shit.
right.
Not to say if they like crush your cat or drown your bunny that that's a whoopsie we can just move on from.
No, but I mean, like, on their bad day, if you can't handle being the supportive person, being their other half, if that's too much for you, then you can't change the way somebody is when they're at their worst. Does that make sense? Like, I get that you can bring the best out of someone or you can bring the worst out of someone.
Yeah, know when it's toxic.
Right. But you're never going to see the worst of someone, especially if
Online.
it's only an online dating situation. You only get to
So,
see what they want you to see.
where I agree, I think the online dating thing starts out as it's platonic. You're just feeling out, like, you're just being friendly, see if you want to meet up. I don't think it's exclusively like, would you like to get married? I mean, other than like the 90-day fiance nonsense where they don't meet each other for a good bit and then they're engaged, which is stupid.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And everybody's surprised when it doesn't work out.
Well,
But anyway, so Kay and Zahid are online dating. How long do they online date for before they in real life?
they started online dating in December of 2005, and Zahid asked Kay if he could move in with her.
Wait, hold up. Zahid moves in with Kay and then he wants Jimmy to come move in with him.
Oh, yeah, you connected those dots real fucking fast, and I'm impressed.
Hey, you told me to get out pen and paper, so I'm tracking this.
Yeah, you are. So he moves in with her, and I think they were only dating for like 2 months online. And I don't think they ever met in person. It was just all online. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's.
She was real lonely.
She was. She's like, yeah, so it's a weird question. You make me happy. I like to check my email for your emails.
I need a beef injection on the regular.
Well, she's like, yeah, come on, move into my house. And that's when Zahid moved to St. Stephen's Way in Percy, Maine. in North Shields. I don't know if I said that right, but I hope I did. And Zahid was living in Sheffield, and that was roughly 135 miles south of North Shields, where Kay's townhouse was. Okay, so he moved 135
Okay.
miles to go move into her house.
How long were they living together before he moves in Jimmy?
4 years, like 3-4 years.
Oh, okay. At least he waited a beat.
Hold on.
Because if he's like still got his shit in boxes and he's like, hey, Jimmy, come on. She don't ask any questions.
Well, I'm going to give you a little insight as to what Kay and Zahid's relationship was like. So in the beginning, they were great living together. Zahid even paid off roughly $25,000 of Kay's mortgage.
Good night.
Yeah, he treated her pretty well. Her neighbors, they liked Zahid at first. They saw that he volunteered and he did a lot of charity work to help the community. Zahid was even photographed with the local mayor for all his charity work. He was in the newspaper on another instance for locating a neighbor's missing dog, and the neighbor tried to give Zahid a reward.
Did he snatch the dog first so he was the hero?
But Zahid was...
He did!
Zahid was very, no, I just love animals, and I'm happy to have been able to help reunite this pet with its loving owners.
And then the Ring camera comes out that sees him hop the yard and take Fluffy.
This was before everybody had those, but...
You don't know?
Well, actually, I don't know, because there is a lot of CCTV footage that is online that you can watch. But anyway, we're getting distracted.
I'm all over this. I'm not distracted. I can just smell the stink from here.
Things were great, right? And Kay thought that they were madly in love. But the longer they were together, the more controlling Zahid would be at times. Like, he would demand that she move furniture in his home in her home to specific places. Then again,
yeah, so he can move around in his wheelchair.
Exactly. So I suppose it could have just been...
Do you mind moving this armoire? I can't get through.
Well, I think maybe it was more... Perhaps it was a lack of him asking nicely.
He probably like caught his fingers between the wheel.
It's not a regular wheelchair. It's a motorized wheelchair.
Look, Andrea, you don't know. It might be on a charger and he's got a regular old one for then every now and then.
He does have a regular one.
He doesn't have to have just the one scooter. Yeah, but I'm just saying, he could have pinched himself or done something and he's like, God, I've been here 4 years. The least you could do is move some of your shit because my wheelchair is this wide, lady. And she might have been like, you're so controlling. And he's just like, controlling.
I really like your little puppet show.
Sorry.
And I'm going to laugh hysterically in like 5-ish minutes. But anyway, but eventually he got so controlling, he would not allow Kay to talk to her friends and family, including her 2 children.
Were they bad influences?
And he would not let her go out anywhere without asking his permission first. He also started becoming violent. He would smash things in the house when he lost his temper.
Just wheel him over to the corner.
I think it's fairly safe to say that Zahid had a little bit of a short fuse. He would throw things at Kay. He would spit in her face.
Why is she getting that close? Or can he hock a loogie like real good? Like, here, come here. Let me whisper you a secret. Just kidding.
That's not funny. It's disgusting. And he also would throw it in her face, though, that he paid off a chunk of her mortgage.
Well, I'm just gonna say it seems real weird if somebody's yelling and throwing stuff that you get close enough to be spat on. So I'm not thinking Kay's real innocent in this. She probably took the batteries out of his wheelchair.
So Zahid is not the great guy that he pretended to be at all.
Usually people aren't. The better they are in public, the more closeted their issues are.
And as you connected the dots very quickly with that pen and paper, I'm glad to know that you take notes really efficiently. That dog that Zahid found, it is suspected that Zahid first stole the dog so that he could be the one to find the dog.
You know what? I'm not real surprised at that because there's a lot of those artificial heroes that they just wanted some attention.
Eventually, Zahid escalated his abuse and began to physically abuse Kay. And now I know you might be a bit confused, and I know it for a fact because of the ramblings you done been doing. But how's this one for you, Claire? Zahid could walk. Shoot, Zahid could run. Zahid simply used his motorized wheelchair to get sympathy from other people. In fact, there is zero evidence of his supposed car accident. He just decided to plop his fat, lazy ass into it and say he was disabled and he then started receiving money from whatever agency gives out money to the disabled in the UK. He was extremely lazy and manipulative.
All right. Hold up. So, at what point did this dumbass go from online dating, meet the feller in a wheelchair, and then just walks inside her house and he's just walking around? Did she not go, this may seem like a red flag? Or did she be like, oh, well, you get free money and you're going to pay off a chunk of my mortgage? She bought it off?
I think it was a surprise to her, but at that point, he is so violent and abusive towards her.
You said she's got a low IQ, or was it she walks in like, it's a Christmas miracle?
So he doesn't walk all the time. He is regularly seen using his motorized wheelchair. Like, it is his
I
go-to.
know, but can you imagine if that's why he wants to know where she's going and when? Because that's how she foiled this plan, and he didn't want her to catch him stealing another dog to rescue it.
You know what? It's entirely possible.
That's where all the control came from. She foiled his little plan.
Zahid would pretend he couldn't walk, but when it was convenient for him, he would jump up out of his wheelchair.
When does that seem convenient to pretend like you got no legs? It seems wildly inconvenient at all points. Apologize to our wheelchair listeners.
Until he's cashing the checks that he's getting for being disabled. He doesn't want to work.
You know, I hope he gets hit by a car and then can't use his legs. And then everyone's like, go ahead, get up and walk. And somebody dumps him out of his chair and like, go ahead, stand up, Zahid.
Well, he would jump up out of his wheelchair and threaten to fight people. Or his neighbors even witnessed him carrying furniture in and out of his and Kay's townhouse a few times.
Why didn't anybody let the authorities know that you got the fraudulent collections going?
I don't know. I guess it's because it's a sensitive topic because, not every person in a wheelchair has to have a wheelchair. And and just because they see him in a wheelchair, they don't know what his financial situation is.
True. There was this one time
at band camp.
No, you pervert. I don't know where you stick your flutes, but it ain't where I put mine. Anyway, that I was out and about, and if I wouldn't have seen this shit happen, I don't know how readily I would have believed it. But this feller was like trying to get his pain medication filled in the pharmacy and was saying that he needed his Percocet filled right now because that's the only thing that stops his seizures, which, just to be clear for those who don't know medication, that's not how that works. So he was making a big scene trying to get him filled early because evidently he had just picked up some. And he was like, oh no, I can feel a seizure. It's coming on unless I get my pain pills. And it's like, seriously, feller. Well, this lady that's behind him in line, like, hops up out of her wheelchair. She's like, here, have a seat. And I was like, what? And he sits down. He's like, thanks, I feel a lot better. And I'm like, these two are a match right here because that lady, that was pretty, like, up until that point, I believed that she needed that wheelchair. But when she flew up out of it, and I'm like, here, have a seat.
Well, you don't know. She could have needed it.
Don't believe anything you see. Andrew, if you would have seen her fly out of that wheelchair, you'd have said she's a spry little thing. What the hell does she need the wheelchair for?
Well,
anyway.
So that's why I don't think anybody made a huge stink, though, about seeing him regularly out of his wheelchair. But there was also times that this supposed wheelchair-bound man was seen running up the street because he was about to miss his bus. So realistically, Zahid did not need his wheelchair.
Was he carrying his wheelchair, like dragging it behind him like little girls will do with their little baby fake stroller things? Like, he's trying to make the bus, and this thing is just like clambering behind him, losing a wheel, a spring went flying.
I don't know. But if you didn't figure it out yet, Zahid, in reality, would volunteer at the local soup kitchens because it would help him find different vulnerable people that he could manipulate. And it turns out if you collect the vulnerable people that are collecting checks,
and then you murder them,
that you end up with a house full of people with free money.
So I've heard about people who do that and then murder them and then go on collecting the checks because that's their last known address.
I've heard of that too. That's not what this feller does.
You don't know.
Well, it's kind of what he does, but not really. So back to Kay and Zahid. Kay did try to leave Zahid, but Zahid overdosed on prescription drugs to try to kill himself. And he told Kay he would only receive medical treatment if she swore not to leave him and promised to stay with him. He also claimed that he was wanted by a gang in his hometown of Sheffield and that if she threw him out, he was going to be murdered.
Did she leave him a brochure for burial plans?
She sure doesn't. She promises that she will never leave him. So that is Kay and Zahid's relationship, okay?
Mm-hmm.
So now I'm going to tell you about the other people in our story just real quick because there's not a lot of information on them. So you already know about Jimmy. It's 2009 and Jimmy, Kay, and Zahid are all living in Kay's townhouse.
Gotcha.
But there's also 2 other women that are living there when Jimmy moves in, okay?
How big is this townhouse? Or are they packed in there like sardines?
They're getting packed in like sardines. But the first woman that I'm going to tell you about is Ann Corbett. She was born November 8th, 1990, which, if you're keeping track,
She's not very old.
Kay's birthday was November 10th. She's younger, a lot younger, but her birthday is November 8th. Anne also suffered with being mentally disabled, and she would have also suffered with bouts of homelessness, and she would regularly attend soup kitchens to receive her meals, and that is how she came into contact with Zahid Zaman, who promised to help her.
How old is she?
She's in her early 20s. She's like 24.
So when Jimmy moves in, these 2 that you're introducing now were already living there?
Yeah.
So it's basically a little shelter that he's using Kay's house for.
Correct. And he's going for those that seem mentally handicapped.
Holding her hostage with his suicide attempts.
Exactly. Now, the next woman I'm going to tell you about is Myra Wood. She was born October 29th, 1996. She was recently divorced just like Kay, and she'd been chatting with Zahid through Facebook, and Zahid and Myra began dating, but he was still dating Kay.
No, I wasn't going to be surprised at that.
Well, Zahid moves Myra into Kay's house so he can have both his girlfriends.
Well, they have such low IQ, they don't realize it.
So I think of the women folk, Kay has the higher IQ. Anne is like she's mentally handicapped. I'm not sure what Myra's mental situation is. I'm gonna say it's pretty low, but I don't know hers.
So he's diddling those 2. How come he's not diddling Anne? Saved her for Jimmy?
Yes.
Oh. This is like a logic puzzle. I'm sitting here like XOXO.
So, and I think the reason that Kay was okay with Zahid's attention being turned to Myra is he seems like he's a difficult person to keep happy. And when he is unhappy, he's very abusive to Kay. He becomes abusive with Myra, and he is abusive with Anne. So he is physically abusing all 3 of these women. When he's happy, obviously, he's not abusing them. And then he meets Jimmy and moves them in. He's the last to join this group, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, as you questioned, the living quarters were very tight. Zahid tells Kay, yeah, so I want you to buy the house up the street that's for sale. Not a bigger home.
Can move out.
No, it's not another home. Or it's not like to sell the house that she had. It's to purchase another home. And so now she has 2 homes. It's not Zahid and Kay's home. It's just Kay now has a second home.
Well, he needs her to go on and get when he's getting his freak on with Myra. Which, by the way, I think of Dr. Quinn, Myra the whore. Turns out it's something with the name. Don't name your children Myra.
And Claire's really sorry to all the Myras that are out there and are not prostitutes or whores. Anyway.
How many have you met?
I don't know if I've ever met a prostitute.
You don't know. But that's interesting. He convinces her. He's real good. He should have been a car salesman because he manages to move in with Kay, move in other people, and then make Kay think it's a good idea for her to buy a house up the street and go on now and get.
I didn't say that.
Sorcery.
I didn't say all that. You're putting words into this here case that have not transpired yet. So anyway, Kay's original home, her townhouse, is number 35. And the second house that Zahid has her buy is number 75. So it's literally in the same row of townhouses. It's just a few houses down. And once she purchases that townhouse, Myra, the other woman, Anne, and Jimmy are moved into house number 75. So Zahid and Kay stay living at 35 together. But Jimmy is, or not Jimmy, Zahid is still diddling Myra and Kay. Does that make sense?
Okay.
And then at this point, that's when Jimmy and Anne begin having a sexual relationship because they're also sharing a bedroom. Not
Ew.
saying that because you share a bedroom, you need to have sex with the person.
That was easy enough. You two are going to be roommates.
Now, in order to keep this new lifestyle, Zahid makes the 4 adults cut ties with everyone except the people in their group. No friends, no family, or else you're cut out.
Because they don't understand their lifestyle.
Well, aside from that, he wants to keep their money and doesn't want them to, explain to their loved one,
Yeah.
dude, this guy's taking advantage of you.
Right. And he seems like he's a puppy saver.
Mm-hmm. These other 4 people had to become like yes men or a Stepford wife type. They could not disagree with Zahid. Whatever Zahid said is the way it had to be. It was Zahid's law. Okay, that is the way these households are run.
Or they get spit on.
Not to relate everything back to a movie, but I shall now reference Cinderella. Zahid,
Lost his slipper.
he would be this evil stepmother. Myra and Kay would be the wicked stepsisters that would like carry out Zahid's word or law. Anne was just there, so I guess you'd compare her to like Lucifer, where
A cat.
yeah, exactly. She's an asshole,
Not innocent,
but not as bad as everybody else.
just going along because that's what's in the air.
Exactly. And because Jimmy was the newest to the group and he was more easily manipulated, he was treated as the servant. He had to cook, he had to do the cleaning, he did all the maintenance on both properties.
The mopping and the washing and all the things.
He just didn't have the friendly little mice to sing with. And he was kicked around by everybody. So I feel like it's pretty accurate with the Cinderella comparison.
Did he lose a shoe?
He lost more than a shoe. If Jimmy didn't complete his task sufficiently, he would be beaten by the group at the command of Zahid. And if they disagreed or didn't carry out his acts, then they would be punished as well. So it's a very not great lifestyle.
Did you ever watch the Memoirs of a Geisha? Where
Nope.
it's just like, where the one lady tells her that I'm going to beat you so the other lady don't beat you harder.
I have not.
You should watch it. It's not a bad movie. It's real long. But she's just like, she's tasked with beating her, but she's like, I am going to beat you and hard, but so that she will not do it harder.
Pretty much same idea. Now, when the group would go out in public, because Zahid didn't lock them in, they did regularly go out and about.
They'd hold hands.
Zahid would be in his wheelchair, and his little groupies would be following behind him like little duckies all in a row. No one was allowed to be in front of Zahid. He was the leader. They played follow the leader. And they had to be in order, and it would be Zahid, then Kay, then Myra, then Anne, and then Jimmy. Step out of line, you got smacked back into your spot.
Well, Jimmy can't step out of line. There's nowhere to go.
Well, he can't walk faster then.
Pretty much, he's just getting smacked.
Pretty much. Soon, Zahid boards up the houses. He boards up all the windows so nobody can see in or out. He sets up cameras so he can spy on his neighbors.
He could have kept the windows open.
If Zahid caught the neighbors doing anything they weren't supposed to, literally anything, infractions such as not parking in their correct parking spot, he would turn them in to whoever he could complain to, whether it be their local council, I would assume like their HOA.
And I say again, who didn't tattle on the whole man runs in the morning? Does he really need a wheelchair? Saw him joggling.
He wanted his neighbors to fear any interaction with him so they would just stay away and not bother him and his little cult of misfits. Zahid would even wear a body cam to try to bait his neighbors by insulting them and talking mad shit. And then if they responded to him, he would try to take the footage to the police and file harassment, saying that his neighbors were being discriminatory towards him.
Yeah, be like, hey, say that one more time. This time into the mic.
He would kick over the neighbors' trash cans. And then when the neighbors would be like, what the hell are you doing? Zahid would try to escalate the situation and like pick a physical fight with these people. There was one incident where Zahid put a ball in a sock and beat his neighbor with the ball in the sock. And the ball was like a pool ball, or I guess in the UK they call them snooker balls. They're like a pool ball. They're just like a quarter-inch smaller. But shit, that's gotta hurt.
Oh, it's billiards.
No, it's called a snooker ball.
All right.
Yeah, I had to look it up. But it's essentially, it looks like a pool ball. It's just a quarter-inch smaller. But could you imagine being whacked with that swinging in a sock?
No. Well, yes, but no.
There was another time that a neighbor accidentally kicked a ball over the fence and it landed in Zahid's garden. You want to take a wild guess as to what Zahid did to retaliate for the ball going in his garden?
He set a cannonball on fire or a bowling ball on fire and threw it into their house.
Pretty close. He set the neighbor's shed on fire and burned it down.
Makes sense.
I'm really concerned about your brain, Claire, that you're able to follow with the pube collecting and all the things. I'm really concerned.
Yeah.
If the police would show up to intervene, he'd obviously plop his fat ass into his wheelchair and claim that the neighbors were just being discriminatory due to his race and or his disability. So police were like, okay, well, they don't have evidence of anything. It just seems like a verbal dispute. They couldn't prove that Zahid actually set the shed on fire.
Why does nobody get any cameras in this neighborhood?
So it really just becomes, because it's 2009, it's the beginning of that. Things are expensive. It becomes his word against the neighbors, and the police would really just be like, dude, you guys need to just leave each other alone, play nice. You know, there wasn't much they could do. So Zahid needed more money, right? And rather than any of these 5 adults work, because some of them are incapable of it, Zahid decided to put in a request for an increase in his monthly stipend. And I guess his caseworker was like, yeah, no, you don't need more money. He didn't like being told no. So you want to guess what he did?
He stole her car.
No.
Oh, they kidnapped him.
He forges a letter from the woman that told him no. And in the letter, it looked legitimate. Like, it looked like it came from this woman's office.
That's because he took the denial letter. And like,
right. I think that's exactly what he did. But in his letter, he wrote his forged letter, he wrote derogatory comments and racial slurs about himself. And he took the letter to the police to press charges on this woman. And the police took the letter seriously. They brought the woman into the police station and she nearly got fired from her job over it. But it was eventually figured out that it was a forgery and thankfully she didn't get fired. But nothing happens to Zahid. He just does the whole, oh, I don't know where this letter came from.
Yeah, that was actually good thinking on him.
He's a manipulative piece of garbage. Now, for the outsiders of Zahid's groupies, I feel like it's safe to say that Zahid was like a harassing piece of shit. But inside his culty clique, it was even worse. And this goes on for years. Years of harassing the neighbors, years of being abusive towards his gang or cult members, whatever you want to call them, his groupies. So I don't know how many members it takes for it to be considered a cult, but I know that the media dubs them as North Shield's death cult.
I would say they've got enough that it's not just a trio.
So Zahid was a terrifying individual, right? And he would regularly beat the 4 cult members with a hammer.
Oh, Jesus. He
would get angry over the tiniest things, and he would threaten to kill them.
What's with you hammer people? And what's going on in the UK that's everybody's go-to? Gonna slap you with a hammer.
Because they don't do the guns. They got to do the hammers. Well, they can ask the same thing about the U.S. What the hell's wrong with the U.S. that we've got all the shootings? They got all the hammer-ins.
Excuse me, ma'am. I've been doing all the cases that are smotherings.
Smotherings of babies, you sick son of a bitch.
It's these people. I'm just telling you, there's been very few that I've done that have a gun involved.
Anyway.
And you're going the right direction to get hammers banned.
Anyway, so he would threaten to kill his cult members. I feel like it's really safe to say that he's just a narcissistic, violent bully, which is fairly accurate to describe him. He would also threaten to slice their throats as he would hold knives to whoever he was threatening.
Hold up. You can't say you feel like and then agree with yourself of that's real accurate.
I feel like it is.
I know, but you said you feel like he's narcissistic and all that. And you're like, and that's real accurate. You just had a conversation with yourself there.
It's your
In case
fault.
you didn't know.
You made me go all day Sunday without talking to you. I'm going through withdrawals.
You started conversating with yourself.
I
But
sure
like, you
did.
know what, Andrew? You're right. Like Andrew jotted it in your notes.
I didn't.
Like,
I was
I agree
agreeing
with
with
what I just wrote in my notes.
what it is I read my notes and I agreed with my notes. I sure did. But anyway, so Zahid would threaten to slice their throats. Another instance,
Mhm.
Zahid sat on Myra's chest until she passed out due to a lack of oxygen.
I'm seeing another connection here with some of your other cases.
Zahid was also a sexual deviant.
Mm-hmm.
He would pee in a glass and force Myra and Kay to drink his urine because
Oh,
he really enjoyed watching that.
all right. Is this going to go the two girls in one cup style? Because I'm going to turn you off. Draw the line at turd drinking.
Anyway, he would also demand sex from Kay and Myra several times a day.
Hope till they brush their teeth.
Zahid also had another freaky fetish. Care to guess what this fetish is?
He liked being paddled.
Bestiality.
Oh no, the neighbor dog. He didn't really save it after all. Dog needs therapy.
I wrote it in my notes. Bestiality. If you guessed it, then you're a pervert, Claire. Shame on you. If you didn't guess it, then I'm disappointed in you and your lack of expecting the unexpected. And I done said it in the beginning.
You really had issues writing this one.
I was working on it Sunday when you done didn't talk to me all day. Anyway, Zahid loved watching animals have sex with women.
Ugh.
So he had an obsession with watching bestiality porn on the computer.
Where does the pee drinking fit into this?
That was just another fetish of his.
All right. What's with you and the bestiality things? You know
I
what?
don't know.
We'll move on.
So he was so obsessed with bestiality, he went out and bought his own dogs.
Oh no.
He tried to force Myra and Kay to let the dogs fuck them. But this was the breaking point for both women. They would take their beatings, but they would absolutely refuse to be penetrated by the dogs.
I guess that's about time they found their point. I just would have wished it was a little earlier. Maybe the pee drinking should have been.
No, they did that regularly.
I know, but I'm just saying, I wish they would have found their point is all a little sooner.
They didn't leave. They just learned to say no. And it was only to the dog fucking.
Oh, all right. What kind of dogs?
I don't know. I think he picked them up from the shelter.
I wasn't sure if maybe they were scared off. Was it a Mastiff? A Great Dane? A Shih Tzu?
Are you telling me the size of the dog would be your deciding factor on whether or not you would
I'm
let
just
it?
going to tell you the size of the dog matters on the size of his penis.
Are you saying that would be your deciding factor, Claire, is the size of the dog's pecker?
No, I'm saying perhaps they were intimidated by the size of that Great Dane. He walked in and like, that's the size of a baby's forearm. And they got scared is all.
If I recall, I think there's a picture of Zahid with it looked like a mixed lab, like a black lab.
Whoa.
You're like, oh, they could have taken that easily. You
Yeah.
sick
I
pervert.
was going, oh. And I was thinking, how do you know that wasn't the dog he saved?
No, the dog he saved was like a little chihuahua type little yappy dog.
That's why he gave it back. He realized this wouldn't do at all. You can hardly see this.
It was a little dog, is all I can tell you. Anyway, at some point, Ivan, now you don't have to write Ivan's name down, just make a mental note, because as soon as we're done talking about Ivan, he's done in this case.
We're done talking about Ivan.
Ivan is Anne's brother, okay? And he came and stayed at the townhouse very briefly with his sister.
He fucked the dog.
No, get off the dog, Claire. We're done with the dog. Now they own the dogs, and Zahid's real disappointed that Myra and Kay will take their beatings, but won't take it from the dog.
Okay.
But anyway, so Ivan's come to stay at the townhouse with his sister, Myra, and Jimmy. And Zahid tried his best to recruit Ivan into their group, but Anne was like, no, whatever you're doing, you're a friggin' weirdo. Stay the hell away from me.
Did he pitch him the dog plan?
Now, during his brief stay with his sister, supposedly some of Zahid's tools go missing. Now, I don't know if Zahid just had it out for Ivan because he refused to join the group, or if the tools really went missing. But Zahid believed that Ivan stole these tools. He couldn't prove it, and he also couldn't beat or bully Ivan. So once Ivan leaves, Zahid snaps. He decided Jimmy, since he was the other man in the other townhouse, would be the fall man.
That's because Jimmy's the last filler.
Yep.
Do they kill Jimmy?
Hold on.
That's a yes.
Jimmy's been a punching bag for several years now. We are at like 2016, and Jimmy moved into this townhouse with this group in 2009. So he's been getting bitch slapped by this whole group for years. Now that Zahid's tools have gone missing, Jimmy has become severely beaten. His beatings have escalated. Zahid beat the shit out of Jimmy on not once, but on a daily basis. He would be brutally beaten by Zahid, Myra, Kay, and his supposed girlfriend, Anne. Zahid enjoyed watching Kay, Myra, and Anne beat Jimmy, so sometimes he'd just sit back and instruct the women on what to do to assault and torture Jimmy. Zahid even went out and purchased several tools with the intention of using them to torture Jimmy. And Zahid's favorite weapon of choice was a 2-pound rubber mallet. The entire group, at the command of Zahid, began starving Jimmy. And I have pictures that are so devastatingly heartbreaking to look at. But you can see that Jimmy is wasting away. He's constantly covered in bruises, and he has realistically become like a shell of the man he once was. Another form of torture for Jimmy was that he wasn't allowed to sit. Now, I know that doesn't sound bad compared to being beaten with a hammer or being starved, but if you're being beaten from collapsing due to being weak from a lack of sustenance, I mean, you can't help that. You're weak. You're getting dehydrated. You're starving. He was posting photos of him literally wasting away. There's photos of him with 2 black eyes. There's photos of him with bruises covering his body with a caption saying, "My body hurts," or "I need help." And no one responds to any of his photos except his supposed girlfriend, Anne, and all she does is like his posts.
Wow.
Jimmy also went to the hospital at the end of 2015 due to the fact that he had so many injuries. He was head to toe covered in bruises. His left shoulder was broken. He had superficial stab wounds to his upper body. Stab wounds, Claire, like literal stab wounds. And Jimmy's in the hospital with all these injuries. However, Zahid accompanied him to the hospital. And when the doctors were like, "So how did you get so many injuries?" Zahid was like, "I got this. Don't answer." Zahid told the doctor that Jimmy had been jumped by a gang, which I guess is true. That was it for the doctor. They didn't ask any more questions. They were satisfied with that answer. Police were not called. They did not question it any further. They patched up Jimmy and sent him back home with Zahid.
Wow.
Yeah. Zahid did not take the fact that Jimmy required medical assistance as a sign to stop abusing the emaciated man.
Emaciated.
What did I say?
Emancipated.
Oh. The group carried on with their abuse towards Jimmy. If anything, they escalated the brutality. They would smash glass bottles over Jimmy's head. They would take turns strangling or standing on Jimmy until he was unconscious from a lack of oxygen. Zahid would get so frustrated with Jimmy for no reason and started ripping out Jimmy's teeth one at a time. And if Zahid couldn't rip the tooth out, he would take a hammer and like a chisel and hammer the tooth out. All while Jimmy's awake, he also posted a picture of himself saying that his mouth hurt because his mouth legitimately hurt. He ended up with no teeth. There was another time that Jimmy had to go to the hospital for his injuries, and the doctors even asked Jimmy what happened to all his teeth. And Zahid told the doctors that Jimmy ripped his own teeth out. And the doctors didn't ask any more questions.
Well, they've got this feller, but they got this feller just like not saying anything.
How did they not ask questions? If you go downstairs and Dave's ripped all his own teeth out, are you telling me that you don't think that warrants a mental evaluation? That is extremely painful to do. Like to just take a hammer and hammer out your teeth. It's not like they came out clean. But anyway, so Zahid also forced Jimmy to have sex with the dogs. I did read that it described that Jimmy was forced to submit to intercourse with the dog. So I'm not sure of the details on who's poking what holes, but either way, it's disturbing as hell. And actually, I'm going to send you a picture.
You both know we ain't gonna be getting it.
Fine, I'll send the email then. So I just sent you the email if you want to open it and look at the pictures. So while you look at those pictures, I'm going to tell you that what makes this worse for Jimmy.
Okay, hold up. I'm sitting here looking at these pictures you sent, and it said he was forced to eat one of his own testicles.
God damn it, Claire. Don't ruin my case.
You unsend it to me. And I'm sitting there looking at his face picture of the shriveled man he's gone up to, and I was like, hey, what?
Fuck.
You did that to yourself.
I know. I didn't think you'd read.
Well, fuck you very much.
Like, I really feel for him. The abuse.
Because at first I thought the bruise on his shoulder was a tattoo.
I did too, but no, that's when his shoulder was broken from getting beaten so badly and stomped on and then sat on until he was unconscious. And it's so heartbreaking because those are posts that he put on the internet asking for help. And it's not like he had a private page. Other people could see this. They just ignored it.
Well, it does seem weird to post it.
Mm-hmm. And then the part that you just done spoiled. So Zahid then walks one day into the living room and says to Jimmy, "Which testicle do you want me to remove?" And Jamie was just like, I don't know.
Neither.
Actually, he said he didn't know. And Zahid was like, all right. And he hands a box cutter to Anne and tells her, cut out one of Jimmy's testicles. It doesn't matter which one. You get to pick. And Anne, she was like, yeah, I'm not doing that. I'll take whatever beating you want to give me. I'm not cutting out his testicle. So Zahid walks over and he takes the box cutter from Anne. He goes to Jimmy and says, drop your pants, forces Jimmy to remove his pants. And while fully conscious, Zahid sliced open Jimmy's scrotum and cut out one of his testicles. All while Jimmy is screaming and writhing in pain.
Where are the neighbors? Like, how do you not, like, there's a lot of screaming coming from the neighbor's house. I feel like somebody should check up on them.
Well, Anne, Myra, and Kay stood on the sidelines and just watched as Zahid tortured Jimmy. If it's even possible to make the situation worse, Zahid took the testicle into the kitchen and boiled it, then returned to the living room with this newly boiled testicle and told Jimmy, eat it. And Jimmy, he's so beaten and mentally and physically abused, he doesn't know what the hell to do. He's already in pain now because his scrotum is bleeding, and his testicle is in
His mouth.
Zahid's hand, boiled. So rather than take yet another beating, he ate his testicle. And while he was eating the testicle, everyone watching was laughing to taunt him. They even asked Jimmy how it tasted.
I don't even know what to say.
Zahid then instructs Anne to cauterize the wound and sew it up with a regular household needle and thread. And no, Anne is not a doctor and does not have medical experience in any way, shape, or form. At this point, Jimmy, as you can see from the pictures I sent you, he's so frail.
He doesn't look like himself.
He doesn't look like himself. And he's skin and bones. And there's pictures, like I said, there's a video of him. You can see that when they're out in public, Anne and Kay are seen dragging Jimmy and pushing him along the sidewalk. He's not only starved, but now at this point, he's got an infection from his testicle being removed. And Jimmy was just in excruciating pain 24/7. And that brings us to the early hours of February 9th, 2016. Jimmy had been screaming out in pain all night. He was unable to sleep. He would just be laying there and just like screaming in pain. And finally at 5 a.m., Myra sent a text message to Zahid saying, quote, that bastard had me awake all night. Zahid responded saying that he and Kay were headed over to their townhouse to deal with Jimmy. Zahid, Myra, and Kay and Anne gather around Jimmy trying to figure out what they're going to do with him. But Jimmy's just so broken at this point. He's non-responsive and just howling out in pain. And Zahid tells Anne to pick up a pair of pants and just tie him around Jimmy's mouth as like a gag to muffle Jimmy's cries. Anne does as she's instructed, and she rolls up a pair of pants and stuffs them in Jimmy's mouth. And Jimmy's cries were now quieter. Satisfied, everybody returns to their respective beds and goes back to sleep.
Wow.
After about an hour of rest, Anne and or Myra go to check on Jimmy, and they notice that Jimmy's no longer breathing. Tragically, Jimmy died at 45 years old on February 9th. Anne had accidentally tied the pants not only around Jimmy's mouth,
But isn't it?
but in the process, she also covered his nose.
Mm.
And Jimmy had been so weak from being starved and the infections that he couldn't pull the gag down from his nose, and he suffocated.
Wow.
But now, what are they supposed to do with his remains? Zahid didn't care that Jimmy was dead. He wasn't worried about getting caught because as far as he was concerned, nobody was going to miss Jimmy. So Zahid and Kay brought over the spare wheelchair that you were talking about earlier, Claire. They wheel that over to where Jimmy's body was. The group wrapped Jimmy in a sleeping bag and placed him in the wheelchair. They then wheeled Jimmy's body outside around 7 in the morning, and they're just strolling down the sidewalk with Jimmy's remains. And they dump him roughly 300 feet from their townhouse like he was a sack of trash. It's like, I guess it's just a dump site, and they just dump the wheelchair over and fling his body down. And then after returning home, the group made a bonfire and burned any evidence that linked them to Jimmy. And then over the next week, Zahid would go around the neighborhood asking the neighbors, "Have you guys seen Jimmy? Jimmy's been missing for a few days. He left and I don't know where he went." So eventually, Jimmy was reported missing. But no one knew where to look for him because prior to living with Zahid,
He was homeless.
yeah, there was really nowhere to look for him. His most stable environment was Zahid's, which I find absolutely heartbreaking. Several weeks went by and Jimmy's body was still not found. Zahid and his little lackeys go back to the dump site where they left Jimmy so they could steal his debit card out of his pocket. They wanted the money that he received from his mental disabilities, and since the police they weren't finding him, there's no reason why the money shouldn't get taken. 6 weeks go by. Jimmy's still considered a missing person. And Anne, she was so distraught over being the person that accidentally killed Jimmy, and she was paranoid the police were going to know that she did it. She told Myra and told Kay and even told Zahid she wanted to go to the police. She wanted to turn herself in because it was an accident. She didn't mean to kill Jimmy. Zahid told her to tie the gag in his mouth. It was an accident. She loved him. She didn't want to kill him. She felt awful.
She should have.
Zahid was like, "Yeah, no, I can't let you do that." And Zahid came up with a plan. He was going to pin everything on Anne. So he writes a 3-page confession and signs Anne's name to it. He goes to Anne and is like, "You did this. I have proof," and waves his paper around. And then Anne grabs her shit and takes off. She's now on the run. Zahid calls the police and says, "Oh my gosh, I'm in danger. My life is in danger because a woman that lives in my house just confessed to killing her boyfriend, Jimmy Prout." Well, the police know that Jimmy's missing. They rush over to Zahid's townhouse and begin investigating. Zahid hands this 3-page confession to police, and the police were like, "Yeah, this doesn't make any sense." So Zahid, Myra, and Kay are all arrested. They're all brought into the police station. The police do find Anne fairly quickly because, again, she's not all there upstairs, so they're able to just snatch her and bring her in. And as soon as police have all 4 of them in custody, they all turn on each other real quick.
Didn't see that coming.
It was Anne who spilled her guts to the police first. She told them everything. She told them about the brutal treatment of Jimmy after Zahid suspected her brother of stealing his tools, and how she's the one that did tie the pants over Jimmy's mouth, not realizing that they were over his nose as well. Anne took the police to go retrieve Jimmy's remains, but since the weather and animals had scavenged Jimmy's body, the coroner couldn't determine a cause of death. However, coroner was able to note the extreme abuse that Jimmy had suffered because he had bones that were in the process of healing, all of his missing or shattered teeth, the stab wounds that went to the bone, his missing testicle. The police also found, like I said, CCTV footage of Jimmy barely able to walk, and he's literally being dragged around by the women. It's also discovered the reason that Jimmy was wrapped in a sleeping bag and dumped was because if Jimmy's body was found, they were hopeful it would just be assumed that since Jimmy would often be homeless, the authorities would figure that he just died due to exposure of the elements. Zahid, Kay, Myra, and Anne all pled not guilty on May 3rd, 2017, and the trial began for all 4 of these individuals. Their trial took 7 weeks. Zahid tried to claim that he was disabled and incapable of harming anyone, and they tried to use his history of volunteering and that he took in strays and that he was just a great feller. However, all three of the women finally had it click that following Zahid was not getting them anywhere good. Each woman testified to the abuse that they suffered at the hands of Zahid. They confessed to the orders of abuse that were given to them by Zahid to carry out on Jimmy, and that if they refused Zahid's commands, they feared the abuse that would be directed at them. And thankfully, the jury saw through Zahid's lies, and they saw that if Zahid had not come into Jimmy's life, Jimmy would still be alive. For Anne, her part in Jimmy's death, they heard they were boyfriend and girlfriend, they share a bedroom. She was a witness to all the abuse that he endured, as well as the pain that he was in when they were alone together. She not only did nothing to help Jimmy, but she was also the one, like I said, who tied the pants around Jimmy's mouth, which ultimately led to him suffocating. Even though it was an accidental suffocation, witnessing all the torture and doing nothing, there's no excuse for that. So Anne Corbett and Zahid Zaman were both found guilty of murder on June 19th, 2017. Anne was given a life sentence with a minimum of 27 years. Zahid was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 33 years in prison. Now, what about his girlfriends, right? Kay and Myra. Kay Rayworth and Myra Wood were found not guilty of murder or manslaughter, but they were found guilty of causing or allowing the death of a vulnerable adult. Kay was sentenced to 12 years in prison.
What?
Yeah. And Myra was sentenced to 9 years in prison.
There was no justice here.
No. Side note, which I refuse to call a fun fact, after the investigation into Jimmy's murder was complete, it was found the authorities had 17 opportunities to help Jimmy. North Tyneside Council, Northumbria Police, Northumbria Healthcare, and the Safer North Tyneside Partnership, all these different organizations say that lessons have been learned from Jimmy's brutal assault and ultimately his death, and that they have already begun implementing a series of recommendations that were made to them. 17 times that someone in desperate need of help was in front of the right person and was ignored. The black and blue bruises,
Right.
the stab wounds, the missing teeth, broken bones, the weight loss, all of it was ignored. I'm pretty much done with this case, but I got a fun fact for you, Claire. Don't laugh. Myra.
He's pregnant.
What? No. Myra Wood. You'll never believe who she buddied up with when she was in prison. You want to take a wild guess as to who her prison pal is?
Kay.
I'll give you a hint. You did a case on this woman.
Oh, Rosemary West.
Yep. 50-year-old Myra Wood is pals with none other than 63-year-old Rose West.
Well, that'll be an interesting relationship because she just found another person to be submissive to.
She sure did. And Claire did that case. You guys should check it out. It's from season 1, The Wicked Witch of the West and her moron sidekick. But apparently Rose was teaching Myra the ropes in prison, and the pair apparently watched TV and listened to the radio together in Rose's prison cell. When Myra gets out of prison after her 9 years, because you figure that was in 2017, which means 2026 she'll be out.
Yeah, assuming she does all of her time.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's true. It's disturbing. But that is the North Shields death cult, according to the media, or the piece of shit Zahid Zaman.
It's real sad.
It really is.
And again, this is a lesson of, if you see some shit, just mention it and see if somebody can go check up on somebody. That's what wellness checks are for.
Exactly.
Especially if you know that that person might be somebody who's susceptible to being manipulated, taken advantage of, all the things.
Yeah, it's real sad.
Open your papers to those cry for helps.
I'm really concerned about the neighbors. Like, what happens in that neighborhood that all those screams and all that were ignored?
Maybe it's because they were doing it during the day hours and people weren't home.
Yeah.
Because I can tell you, if I'm at work, I'm clearly not going to hear whatever going on happens in my neighborhood.
Yep, but we'll post the pictures online. You guys can check them out.
There are no pictures of the boiled testicle.
And there's no pictures of the dog.
Oh, I thought you said you had pictures of the dog.
There was a picture of Zahid or Jimmy with a black lab, but I don't know the context of what that pet was in relation to this case.
This was his first boyfriend. Thank you for listening to Homicide Hobbies. I'm Claire.
I'm Andy.
Follow us each week to get your fix of the atrocities that occur in true crime. And don't forget to tell people about us and rate us if you like us. But don't rate us if you didn't. Just change the channel.